Good morning, everyone. I'm Auntie Kara, but this video is not for kids. This is another one of my book recommendations for grown-ups who love fairy tales edition. And today we are going to be tackling a very, very big series and one of my favorites, the Cousins War series by Phillipa Gregory. And believe it or not, this is not all the books that are in the series. I've lent out a few. But I have read all of these ones and a couple others, and it's definitely one of those series that keeps me coming back every time there's a new book. I get really excited. Oh my goodness. So Phillipa Gregory, that's a lot of heavy books down there. Phillipa Gregory, as most people know, is a really famous historical fiction author. Probably one of her more famous lines is the other book, Boleyn Girl series that has a lot of books from the Tudor age. So this one is the book series that comes, historically speaking, a little bit before that. I'm sure most people know Henry VIII. So this book centers around his, it's a very long it's a very long series, so it kind of ends with his father and starts with his grandfather, I believe, and kind of follows the whole thing, and even maybe before that with the great grandfather, I believe too, now that I'm thinking back to how far it goes. The first book I read from the series is called The White Queen. Unfortunately, I don't have that one on hand. I wanted to read from that one, but I've lent it out again, as I do with all my favorites. But I'll tell you a little bit about why I think that even though this is historical fiction, it belongs in the category with fairy tales. And that's primarily because of the York women. First, before Elizabeth marries the king, known as the Woodville women. And the Woodville women had a bit of a reputation for being kind of magical. A lot of them were accused of witchcraft. There is some sort of like family legend folklore attached to their line, that they were the descendants of a water goddess. So throughout the series, there's a whole lot of spells and witchcraft, naturecraft, and a lot of premonitions and visions and those gut feelings, that women's intuition sort of deal. And that plus just the outrageously epic romance between Elizabeth Woodville and the King of York um, really, I think, fulfills that fairy tale category for me. In the White Queen, there is a marvelous scene where I won't give you too much because you can just read the books, and a lot of people know the history too. So the War in the Roses was between the Lancasters and the Yorks. And if those names sound a little familiar, yeah, George R.R. Martin took the War of the Roses as inspiration for Game of Thrones. So it's a lot of that, like, the crown keeps shifting between person to person. There's a king, the Red Rose King, the Lancaster, I have to try not to say Lancaster, the Lancaster King, became unable to fulfill his role as king. A lot of people thought he was mad or very, very sick. There's a whole lot of speculation surrounding that, what actually occurred for that king. And they basically took the crown and said, you're not fit to rule. And there was a bunch of wars, and the Yorks got the crown. That said, however, they didn't hold on to it. There was a lot of back and forth, being the red rose, the white rose, the red rose, the white rose. So and eventually it culminated, and the whole thing ended with Henry VII, I believe, marrying Elizabeth Woodville's daughter, Elizabeth York. And that joined the red rose and the white rose, which is how we get the Tudor rose, which is both. So that's a little bit of the history about it. What I love about these books is, in addition to being very well written, Phillipa Gregory has an excellent understanding of how to write in a way that just flows and allows the reader to get lost in the story. And these books are so much like that it's hard to put them down. And I always dream about them too, which is really fun. The first thing I really love about this book and this series of books is that it centers around historical events, but it centers around the women involved in these historical events. So it's a lot of how, well, yes, that deals with war and all the political stuff going on. It's a lot of the stuff that happened behind the scenes. And yes, it's historical fiction, so not all of it is factual, but Phillipa Gregory is very well researched, and she does a little note at the back of each book talking about where she got the evidence to support things, and I feel like she really tries to do her best guess as to kind of filling in the blanks of history and the personal social bits that aren't written about as much as the war and the politics and all of that sort of stuff. So I feel like she does give you a good sense of kind of the time, and maybe not factually what was happening at the time all of the time, but in terms of what the public's understanding of what was going on at the time is happening. So you get a really good sense of kind of the backside of it and what life could have been like for these people. And the series doesn't just deal with the York side of it, which is really interesting. So the one I'm going to be reading you today is The Lady of Rivers, which is about Elizabeth Woodville's mum. So it's kind of the first generation of the York family. The White Queen deals with Elizabeth Woodville, who then becomes Elizabeth York, Queen Elizabeth York. And then the other one in the York side of it is The White Princess, which deals with Elizabeth York, who becomes Elizabeth Tudor and is Henry VIII's mother. So they also have the Red Queen, and the Red Queen is really interesting because it happens pretty concurrently with the White Queen, and you get to see the other side of things. So you really get a chance to dive into this conflict in this world that really went on for quite a while, and see both sides of the spectrum and understand both points of view. That being said, I definitely relate more to the York side of things, mostly because of the ties to paganism and that women's magic, and it's not so piously Christian as the Red Rose side of it was, or at least is portrayed in these books. In The White Queen, there's this really wonderful, I'll put this heavy book down, there's this really wonderful scene at the beginning where essentially Elizabeth Woodville's first husband died fighting the battle that allowed the York princes to take the throne. There were 3 brothers, and so she became disenfranchised and lost her lands and everything because that was attached to her husband, who was considered a traitor at this point. And she really needed that land back because as a woman you couldn't own that land, but she had sons from that marriage. So she heard the king was coming through her area, and she was going to go and basically beg him to allow her sons to take the family name and the family house and basically not leave their family destitute, or at least as destitute as you could, the aristocracy at the time. So there's this really beautiful fairy tale-esque scene of her getting ready and being really stressed out and going to wait under an oak tree, and then the king comes wandering down on his horse with his whole group, and he sees her standing under there, and like a ray of light. It's that love at first sight scene, which is just oh so beautiful. And their whole marriage is wrought with war, but it is an incredible romance, and there's like all sorts of secret marriage stuff at the beginning, and oh, does he really love me, or is he just like trying to pull one over on me? There's so much drama, and like with them getting overthrown and having to go into hiding, and the king has to go back into war, there's a lot of separation and reuniting, and that drama of, is he going to be okay, is he going to come back, are we going to be safe? And you know what, like, all of that happened. Like, they did go into hiding. Elizabeth York and her family spent years hiding in nunneries and stuff over their reign, and all sorts of things. I won't ruin anything too detailed, but what happened to the York princes and that whole debacle of intensity that I can't even imagine living through. So I, for one, really enjoy this exploration of these powerful women that lived in very, very trying and very, very challenging times, and the author's take of what that must have been like for them and the characters that must have been behind these people who have endured all of these things. So that's what I'll leave you with for today. I could talk about this for hours and hours, but I won't bore you. I'm just going to dive into a few scenes from The Lady of the Rivers. And this book centers around Jaquetta, which is Elizabeth Woodville's mother. And it's not the first one, but it does set a lot of the groundwork for the rest of the story, so it is a good spot to start if you wanted to start there. There's no real strict order for these. You can kind of jump around a little bit, as long as you kind of keep track of who the characters are, and you'll get all the same things out of the stories. All right. The Duchess steps back rapidly and gestures for the doors to her room to be closed, but we can still hear the regent swearing and damning his soul at the top of his voice. The Duchess shrugs. Men will be men, and this is wartime. And my aunt smiles understandingly. The lute player increases his volume as best he can and starts to sing. I go to the window and look out. In the market square they have a half-built pyre, a strong structure with a big central beam and the wood stacked around it. Joan has confessed and recanted. She has been found guilty of her crimes and sentenced to imprisonment, but they are not taking the wood away. My aunt gives me a nod that we are going to leave, and I go to the hall to wait for her as she delays inside the Duchess's rooms, saying a few words of farewell. I have a hood pulled over my head, my hands tucked inside my cape. It is cold for May. I wonder if Joan has blankets in her cell, as the big double doors to the Duke's public rooms are thrown open and the Duke himself comes out quickly. So that, of course, is the Trial of Joan of Arc. All right. So the next one I'm going to read is kind of the beginning of the romance between Jaquetta and her husband. And they have a marriage of love and romance for sure. The series really speaks to the inner romantic in me. They have a lot of love, like legendary. People talk about it throughout the whole series, about how deeply they loved one another. I take a long pause, and then I raise my eyes and give him a look as limpid as a forest fool. Oh, have I been mistaken in you? Have I been long mistaken? Do you not love me? Do you want to marry me? Don't you want to marry me? Shall you cast me aside? He drops to his knees. Before God, I love you and cherish you more than anything in the world. Of course I want to marry you. I love you, heart and soul. Then I accept, I say gleefully. I shall be happy to be your wife. He shakes his head. I should be honored to marry you, my love. You are far, far above my deserts. But I so fear for you, the thought strikes him, and for our child. Gently he puts his hand on my belly. My God, a child! I shall have to keep the two of you safe. I shall have two to care for now. I shall be Jaquetta Woodville, I say dreamily, turning the name over. Jaquetta Woodville, and she will be Elizabeth Woodville. Elizabeth? You are sure it is a girl? I am sure she will be Elizabeth, the first of many children. If they don't behead me for treason. They won't behead you. I shall speak to the king, and I shall speak to Queen Catherine, his mother, if I have to, and we will be happy. So lovely. All right. So I have one more section for you. It's a little bit longer. This gives you a sense of like that magic that the Woodville women have, for better or worse. I thought, our lovely old house is silent in the darkness. A beam creaks as the old timbers settle. Richard gets out of bed and lights a taper at the dying fire, and then lights a candle so that he can see me. Jaquetta, you are white as a ghost. I thought someone woke me. I'll take a look round, he decides, and pulls on his boots and drags his sword out from under the bed. I'll go to the nursery, I say. He lights a candle, and the two of us go out together into the dark gallery above the hall. And then I hear it, the strong, sweet singing of Melusina. That's the goddess. So high and so pure that you would think it was the sound of the stars moving in their spheres. I put my hand on Richard's arm. Do you hear that? No, what? Music, I say. I don't want to say her name. I thought I heard music. It is so clear and so powerful that I cannot believe he cannot hear it, like a silver church bells, or like the truest choir. Who would be playing music at this time of night? He starts to ask. But already I have turned to run down the corridor to the nursery. I stop at the door and make myself open it quietly. Martha, the new baby, is asleep in her crib, the nursemaid in the truckle bed nearest to the fire. I put my hand on the child's rosy cheek. She is warm but not in fever. Her breath comes slowly and steadily, like a little bird breathing in a safe nest. In the high-sided bed beside her sleeps Dickon, humped up with his face buried into the down mattress. Gently I lift him and turn him on his back so I can see the curve of his sleeping eyelids and his rosebud mouth. He stirs a little at my touch, but he does not wake. The music grows louder, stronger. I turn to the next bed. John, the 5-year-old, is sprawled out in sleep, as if he is not too hot. The cover is kicked sideways, and at once I fear that he is ill. But when I touch his forehead, he is cool. Jaquetta next to him sleeps quietly, like a neat little 6-year-old girl she is. Mary in bed beside her stirs at the light from my candle, but still sleeps. Their 11-year-old sister Anne is in a truckle bed beside them, fast asleep. Anthony, 8 years old, in the bigger bed, sits up. What is it, Mama? Nothing, nothing, I say. Go to sleep. I heard singing, he says. There is no singing, I say firmly. Lie down and close your eyes. Louis is really hot, he remarks, but does as he is told. I go quickly to their bed. The 2 boys sleep together, and as Anthony turns on his side, I see that Louis, my darling son, is flushed and burning up. It is his fever that has made their share bed so hot. As I see him and hear the insistent ringing music, I know that it is Louis, my darling 12-year-old son, who is dying. All right. So there's a million other passages I could read you, but unfortunately I have to leave you with this for now. I hope you go out and try one of these books. You might get a little addicted. You might not. Anyway, if you love them, let me know in the comments section. As always, if you enjoy these videos and want to see more, don't forget to like and subscribe below. And I will see you guys again in another couple of weeks. Ta-ta for now, and keep reading.